Sometimes the simplest conversations end up meaning so much.
The last time I spoke with my sister, it was her nephew's birthday, and I had said, could you please take the day off, come out here for his birthday. And then she said, it's not like it's gonna be the last one I ever get to come to. And I said, you never know.
Just a few weeks later, 18-year-old Becky Friedley was dead. The third, and investigators believe, only intended victim in a brutal triple homicide. Then 7 years after the horrific murders, Becky's ex-boyfriend, Robert Pape, and his friend, Christian Smith, were under arrest.
So when there were finally arrests in this case, did you think, we're now going to get justice?
I did. It was one of the happiest days of my life when they were arrested.
And then that was followed by?
The news that they were going to let them go.
That's right, just 6 months after the arrest, and with little warning, all charges were dropped, and the boys were let go.
These were not the right guys.
We cried. My mom and I and my sister, we called each other and just cried.
Officially, the DA's office claimed there were procedural issues with the grand jury that indicted the two. But private investigator Luis Bolaños thinks there may have been more at play. Hold on, because things are about to get a little crazy.
They were in custody for a few months, so now they're getting ready for the preliminary hearing. And there's a ton of motions, and one of the motions filed by one of the attorneys for the suspects subpoenaed the DA himself, Paul Zellerbach.
Wait a minute, the DA was called to testify about this case?
This case or something relevant to it, and that's almost unheard of, to have the actual DA come testify.
But Zellerbach never took the stand because a few days before he was scheduled to appear, the case against Pape and Smith was dropped.
The first thing that came to my mind was, this is Paul Zellerbach doing this so he doesn't have to testify. He never had to get on that stand.
But why was the DA subpoenaed in the first place? Lewis says it most likely had something to do with Zellerbach's tough re-election campaign, when something happened totally unrelated to the murder, but that would affect the entire outcome. Zellerbach was caught on video tearing down his opponent's campaign signs.
He was going to testify on a Monday. The Friday before he was to testify, he let these two clowns go. He released them.
But as strongly as Lewis and others felt about Robert and Christian, could there have been any other suspects?
So who is Javier Garcia?
Javier was a really sweet guy, really nice. They were Becky and Javier were best friends.
Just friends? Depends on who's talking.
Javier was very, very much in love with Becky, and Becky was not in love with Javier.
And one more thing.
Javier's cell phone did ping up in the area about the time of the homicides.
Javier told police it was because he was driving toward Becky's to see if she wanted him to come along on that hike with Robert and Christian, but that after she declined, he turned around and drove home. Whatever the case, it was enough for prosecutors to ask Javier to testify as a witness before the grand jury indicting Robert and Christian. But here's where things take yet another turn.
Well, Javier's father works for the Riverside County District Attorney's Office at that time.
According to reports, Javier's father would only allow his son to testify if he was granted immunity.
It could have just been simply a very protective father that wanted to protect their son.
In fact, Javier was confirmed to be miles away at home when the murders actually occurred and was ruled out as a suspect. Regardless, DA Zellerbach refused to grant immunity. So Javier never testified. And as if that wasn't crazy enough, remember that incriminating video that busted Zellerbach?
The individual that caught him ripping down a campaign sign was Javier Garcia Sr. In that
Javier's,
video,
hold
his
on.
father.
What? Javier's father, who works for the DA, gets video of the DA tearing down campaign signs, which ultimately
gets the DA arrested.
And he was convicted for a misdemeanor.
This is crazy. Why is that so important to this case?
Well, the DA responded that the reason that Javier Garcia Sr. was following him and trying to find something that he was doing wrong is because he was upset that he wouldn't give his son, Junior, immunity.
That's what Zellerbach said.
That was his initial response, yes.
But getting lost in the political circus was the very real fact that 3 people had been savagely murdered, and no one was facing justice. Thankfully, that was about to change with the election of a new district attorney.
The 3 victims in this crime were John Hayward, Vicky Friedley, and Rebecca Friedley, known as Becky.
Mike Hestrin takes over as new DA. Mike Hestrin vowed to pursue this vigorously and see if he can come up with enough evidence to rearrest these guys. More importantly, get to the truth, whether they deserve to be arrested or not.
One of the first things investigators did was re-examine the original evidence against Pape and Smith using updated technology, including that business card with Christian Smith's DNA on it.
DNA testing had improved so much that it made it 100 million to 1 that the DNA on that card was definitely Christian Smith's, where before it was something like 323,000 to 1. So it took that right off the table.
And then this. In online messages sent long before the murders between Robert and a friend, she asked for help with a bad relationship. Robert, writing as Buttercup 1000, says, "If you know where he lives, we can professionally burn down his house." She responds, "That's right, you're a little pyro." Then Pape answers, "I've gone through a 6-pack of matches already today."
The fire was already in their arsenal. They like to set things on fire. And somehow all that morphed into the decision to set the house and everybody there on fire.
But in what may be one of the most incriminating pieces of evidence to date, authorities recently uncovered recordings of phone calls Robert made from jail after his first arrest. Talking to his then-wife, Sarah, Robert apparently discusses hiding unregistered firearms, including one of the same caliber used to kill Vicky Friedley. We reached out to Sarah, who has since divorced Robert, but her lawyers have advised her not to speak at this time. New DA Mike Hestrin, however, was ready to say plenty.
What I thought was going to be a few months of a review turned into almost a year and a half.
This exclusive photo released by our affiliate, KESQ, shows the exact moment just a few months ago when Robert Pape was rearrested. Christian Smith was soon to follow, as was an official apology to the families for the apparent mishandling of the case.
I apologized to them for the added anguish and pain that must have caused them.
When you heard they were rearrested, what was that like?
I was very cautious because of the experience, but I do feel that this time we have the right evidence.
And prosecutors hope one of those new pieces of evidence may very well amount to the smoking gun that makes these charges stick.
Right now, the DA's office has an informant that basically has Christian confessing.
Basically, yes. This informant claims to have had a conversation years ago with Christian Smith shortly after the triple homicides, in which Christian Smith bragged about how things got so out of hand up at the homicide scene that they had to burn the place down to the ground.
Both men have pleaded not guilty, and both their attorneys and family members vehemently deny the charges. If convicted, Pape would face the death penalty. And Christian, who after the murders actually went on to become a decorated war hero, receiving 2 Purple Hearts, faces life.
What do you think of Robert and Christian?
I'd like to wait until they're convicted before I make a statement so harsh. I don't want to make such a horrific statement until the trial's over.
But whatever the final outcome, the end result will be the same.
It's a horrendous crime. So how does your family manage with that kind of tragedy?
You don't manage. It was very difficult. Losing Becky was, excuse me, it was such a big loss because she was like the heart of our family. She was so young, so full of life, and you know, she didn't even have a chance to live.
Coming up next, two legal experts bring the courtroom to the streets of New York as they take sides on the Pinyon Pines murder case. The heated debate is up next.